And thanks for having me. And, back in 1992, when I ran for president, some of you may have missed that, I don't know. I think a lot of people missed it. But when I ran for president, I must admit, Lane Kirkland, the head of the AFL-CIO, did not endorse me. But the CWA did. Woo! I had Morty Barr, Loretta Bowen. So I've always had a special place in my heart for the communication workers of America. And that relationship has been especially strong over the last 7 years with Larry Cohen as your president. I have enormous respect for him as a leader. He's put CWA on the map as a two-fisted, never-give-up fighting union. And I tell you, we fought side by side for the Employee Free Choice Act. And had it not been for that lousy special election in Massachusetts that replaced Ted Kennedy with Scott Brown, we would have passed most of the Employee Free Choice. Not all, but we would have passed most of it. That one election with one vote set us back. Well, I want you to know two things. One thing, as long as Larry Cohen is your president, and as long as I'm in the Senate, we're going to keep working together to pass the Employee Free Choice Act. Of course, Larry is a big picture, big thinking kind of guy. He realized that if we're going to pass the Employee Free Choice Act, then one of the first things we got to do is reform the filibuster rule in the United States Senate and get rid of the filibuster. For decades, the right wing has used the filibuster. That's the need to get 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate. They've used that in the past to block civil rights legislation, to block pro-union legislation. It's the same old Southern Dixiecrat strategy, now adopted by Republicans, of blocking any progressive legislation that would help the middle class and working people in this country. I can tell you, Larry knows this, and we're going to be working together. Now, this Congress adjourns this fall for the election. When we meet together again next January, we're going to go after that filibuster rule again to try to get rid of it in the United States Senate. Well, I detected as I came into this morning a kind of an upbeat mood among people here. I'm upbeat too. One of the reasons for us being upbeat, I think, is that our president, Barack Obama, is off his heels and back on his toes again. Once again, he's the fighting Barack Obama that we got fired up about 4 years ago. No question about it, we all got rocked back on our heels after the last election, lost the House, several Senate seats, lost a lot of governorships and legislatures. Tea Party was setting the agenda. But what a difference a year makes. The American people are starting to catch on. They're realizing that the right wing's prescription for America, slashing programs for the middle class, attacking unions, repealing health care reform, is the wrong prescription. People are listening to Obama's speeches, his great speech he gave in Osawatomie, Kansas, his State of the Union, and they like what they hear. He's talking about income inequality, tax fairness, rebuilding the middle class, creating good jobs by investing in America. It's a solid, progressive, populist message, and it's just what America needs right now. So yes, we're upbeat. Barack Obama is back, and he's in fighting mode. I think there's another reason that we're upbeat. Let's be frank about it. We're upbeat because we've been watching those Republican debates. Boy, you ever notice every time they have one of those debates, Barack Obama's poll numbers go up? The Republicans, Larry, they've had all these saviors this year. Yeah, right. First they had Don Trump. Let's see, then they had, Michelle Bachmann. Then Herman Cain. And then their big savior was going to be Rick Perry until he opened his mouth. And oops came out. Now, especially after South Carolina, they decide that Newt's going to be their savior. And I say, why not? There's always room for one more in the clown car, you know. So last night, Mitt Romney wins Florida. I heard Newt said he was going to go on. I'm going to get out my Go Newt button. Hang in there, Newt. Hang in there, buddy. So this is what it's boiled down to and why we're upbeat. The leadership of today's Republican Party is boiled down to this. Mitt Romney, a zillionaire who paid 14% in taxes, has money in the Cayman Islands and a Swiss bank account. On the other hand, you have Newt Gingrich, the guy with big ideas, like colonizing the moon. And he wants to put these big mirrors in space to shine sunlight down at night so we don't need so many streetlights. I'm not making this up. So that's what we're left with. Republican Party led by zillionaires and certified kooks of the Republican Party. By the way, on slate.com, there's a calculator. If you go to that site, slate.com, there's a calculator that lets you figure out how many years it would take for you to work to earn Mitt's annual income. For example, if you're a teacher making $50,000 a year, it would take you 433 years to make his annual income. But you know, teachers, I'm sure, and CWA members don't begrudge people, rich people, their income and stuff. We just want them to pay the same damn tax rate as everybody else is paying in America. So we've seized, I think, the national conversation with a populist message, focusing on income inequality, tax fairness, creating good jobs, rebuilding the middle class. It's a good populist progressive message. And it's great to have Barack Obama back in the game. Meanwhile, Republicans are locked into their same old negative message, doom and gloom, slash investments, tax cuts for the rich, repeal health care. Paul Ryan and the House Republicans have served notice that in their 2013 budget, they will again call for dismantling Medicare and converting it to a voucher program. Folks, that is a losing message. Over the past year in the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee that Larry said I took over the chairmanship after Ted Kennedy's death, I've chaired 4 hearings last year on the crisis of the middle class. Not surprisingly, we found more and more people struggling to make ends meet. Jobs are insecure, their savings and pensions have shrunk, and they see an economic system rigged in power, rigged for the powerful and the rich. We also found that there's a direct correlation, actually a causation, between the strength of the labor movement and the strength of the middle class. When union membership was at its peak in the 60s, the share of national income going to the middle class was also at its peak. As union membership fell down, so did the strength of the middle class. And with union membership falling below 12%, incomes and support for the middle class has gone down, and now the middle class has its back against the wall. We all know it was unions that built the middle class in this country, the strongest middle class the world has ever seen. I've often said, if you don't believe me, just go to the dictionary and look up middle class, and it'll say, see organized labor. Over the past year, these Tea Party Republicans have been pushing not just misguided budgets, but I think a dangerously misguided premise. Their premise, you see, is that America is poor and broke, and we can no longer afford the investments to rebuild a strong middle class and a world-class economy. I totally reject this premise. The United States of America is the richest nation in the history of the world. We have the highest per capita income of any major nation in the world. Well, that kind of begs the question. If we're so rich, why are we so broke? Well, the problem is that too much of our wealth has been misallocated and misinvested. The economic playing field is out of balance, tilted strongly in favor of the wealthy. On that score, let me quote a senator and former Democratic presidential candidate from 1992, who, by the way, won the Iowa caucuses, but ended up losing to some obscure fellow from Arkansas. That candidate said in 1992, and I can quote him accurately, "In a capitalist system, there come times when too few people have too much money and too much power, and too many people have too little of either. One of the primary functions of a free democratic government is to redress that imbalance." I said that in 1992, and I say it again today. So what's the best way forward? Well, instead of the slash and burn approaches of the Tea Party and the Republicans, we need a way forward that reflects the hopes and the can-do spirit of the American people. Smart countries in difficult times don't turn a chainsaw on themselves, and we shouldn't do that here either. I can't emphasize this point too strongly. The single most important thing we can do to restore the middle class is to create good jobs, reduce the unemployment rate, get this economy moving again. Now, every time I talk about jobs, I don't talk about jobs. I say good jobs. Good jobs. Well, I pointed out before, you just want to talk about jobs. Hell, slaves had jobs. That was a full employment economy. The kind of jobs I'm talking about are good jobs where people can make enough to have their own home, have a decent income, buy a new car once in a while, take a vacation, raise their kids in good neighborhoods, have a decent retirement when they retire. That's the kind of good jobs that we want for America. Now, using my committee and as a chairman, I've had all these hearings on the middle class. I've had hearings on pensions and what's happening to pensions in America. And I'm going to have a bill that I'll be introducing pretty soon. I'm calling it the Rebuild America Act. And I'm just going to, in my limited time, let me just touch on the 6 main components of this bill. First, invest in the infrastructure and manufacturing. Think about it. We're in the second decade of the 21st century. We're still driving on Eisenhower's highways and going to Roosevelt schools. It's time to upgrade this. Our global competitors, especially in Asia, they're bold, they're forward-looking, they're building new infrastructures, and we're falling behind. So my bill would invest in all the new physical infrastructures, roads, bridges, energy efficiency systems, smart grid, public schools, community colleges. The bill would mandate the development of a national manufacturing strategy. Second, my bill would create a world-class job training system to prepare to compete for the jobs of the 21st century. Today we hear businesses say they can't find workers with the skills they need. Well, let's get our government focused on that. Let's put the money out there and the investment out there to upgrade skills along with businesses around the country. Third, my bill would focus on empowering workers. Today, Americans are working harder than ever, but their efforts aren't translating into bigger paychecks. So, my bill would raise the minimum wage, provide for automatic future raises. It would expand access to overtime pay so that workers called on to work long hours away from their families receive the fair pay they deserve. It will ensure that all workers have a right to join together, stand up for fair wages and working conditions, and that employers will face real penalties for violating the right of people to get together and join a union. Some of that stuff we had in the Employee Free Choice Act, Larry. Fourth, the bill would bolster retirement security. I tell you, what's happening in America, it's just awful. 30 years ago, in 1980, 1 out of every 2 workers had a pension. I mean, a pension that would last you till the day you died. 1 out of every 2, 50%. Today, only 1 in 5 workers has a pension in America. 1 in 5.
Shame on them.
It's shame. It's shameful. 1 in 5. And it's going down every year. And they say, well, they got 401ks. 2 in every 5 workers that have a 401k don't have enough to last them. 5 or 6 or 7 years and they're out. 2 in every 5 workers. Folks, that's 40% of working America today have no pension plan and no 401k. It's abysmal. Well, they have Social Security. Well, okay. First of all, we're going to make sure that Social Security is never privatized and put out on Wall Street. So my bill would strengthen Social Security and have the benefits replace a greater share of pre-retirement income. We'd also rebuild the defined benefit pension system so that more Americans, we can start raising that back up so more and more Americans have a guaranteed retirement system that will last them till they die. The 5th component of my bill focuses on strengthening families. Well, we took 1 step with the Affordable Care Act in helping families cope with the cost of health care. You know, and they want to repeal it. Last Friday, I was in Iowa. I was walking a picket line. Yeah, I still walk picket lines, my friends. I was walking a picket line. And I'm proud to do so. People wonder why I do those things. Well, you know, as Larry told you, I wasn't born with a suit and tie on. My dad was a coal miner. I had an 8th grade education. My mother was an immigrant. I'm not going to go into all that, but I'll tell you, I'll never forget. It's seared into my very being what happened to my brother. My brother had a good job. He had a job at a plant in Des Moines, Delavan's manufacturing plant, making nozzles for jet engines for aircraft, some of the ones I flew when I was in the Navy. They never had any. It was owned by an individual, Mr. Delavan. It was organized. It was United Auto Workers plant. My brother was a proud member of that union. And after 23 years there, never had any labor strife, never had any problems. Till old man Delvin got old, he sold his company to a group of young investors. These young investors came in. One of them openly bragged. It was in the Des Moines paper. This is back in the 70s, folks. This is in the 70s. Openly bragged, if you want to see how to bust a union, come to Delavan's. So when the contract came up, the new owners refused to negotiate in good faith, left for the workers to go out on strike. That was my brother. First time ever. He'd never been on a strike. 23 years, never been on strike. So went on strike. Well, they busted that union. They busted the union. After a year, you can vote to decertify. They brought in all the strike breakers and the replacement workers. And I saw what that did to my brother. I didn't tell you, my brother was disabled. And he was then 53, 54 years old. He had this good job. He had a good pension, good benefits, vacation time. He was doing well. He was really a part of the middle class. And where a 54-year-old disabled man gets a job these days, and what happened to him, he got a job as a janitor, cleaning toilets and stuff in a shopping mall. Not that that's not a bad job, but it wasn't unionized. He had no benefits, no retirement, no health care. He had nothing. He never got over that. And I can tell you, I never got over it either. That's why as long as I have a breath to take, as long as I am privileged to represent you and to work in Congress, I am never going to give up the fight to do away with replacement workers in America. So I just wanted you to know where I'm coming from on some of this stuff. Well, anyway, health care. So I was on the picket line. That's where I got sidetracked. So I was out there on the picket line. And this is a Teamsters union, and it's a plant that makes aluminum stuff. Again, they have not had a work stoppage since the 1960s. So, good company. Contracted, reach their contract, negotiate, move on. Never had a work stoppage since the 1960s. So I asked the head of the union, well, what's this all about? Why are you out? You know what the issue is? Health care. Company can't afford any longer to cover their employees and their health care. Friends, that's why we need the Affordable Care Act. We got to get health care off the bargaining table. Get it out there. A national health insurance program for all Americans. I want workers negotiating for what the National Labor Relations Act says. Wages, hours, conditions of employment. You ought not to be negotiating for your health care. So my bill would strengthen that, update the child care development block grants, more subsidies for child care, incorporate my Healthy Families Act, which would allow workers to earn up to 7 paid sick days per year. I'm almost embarrassed it's that low, but 7 paid sick days per year, which they could use for preventative care, recovery from illness, or care for a sick family member. And the sixth and final component of the bill focuses on how we pay for it and do it in a way that strengthens the middle class. Well, for starters, here's how we start paying for it. We include a tax on Wall Street trades called a financial transaction tax. Thank you, Larry Cohen. Your president has been one of the great leaders on this issue. And so our bill would place a tax, get this, 3 pennies on $100. 3 pennies on not a dollar, 3 pennies on $100 on these tradings that are going on. Just to show you how much is going on in all these tradings of derivatives and stocks and stuff, CBO estimates that would raise $350 billion over the next 10 years. Just 3 pennies on $100. John Bogle, who was the head of Vanguard, he was one of the mutual funds, said this would not only raise money, but slow the rampant speculation that's created havoc in our markets. And again, transaction tax, Great Britain has one. Other countries have them. More than what I'm asking for right now. And we had a transaction tax. We had a tax on stocks and bonds and transactions until 1966 in this country. In fact, during the Great Depression, Franklin Roosevelt and the Democratic Congress doubled the transaction tax to finance economic recovery. And I tell you, it's wonderful. You go back and you read those debates and you get the press reports from that era in the 30s when they doubled the transaction tax, and it's like they're saying the same thing. Oh my God, this is going to destroy Wall Street. It'll be the end of the free enterprise system. This is a socialist mover. Blah, on and on and on. Well, by God, they did it in the 30s. They doubled it, and it helped get us out of the Depression by putting people to work all over this country, and we need to do the same thing today. And in addition to that, we'll require high-income taxpayers to pay their fair share, sort of a variation of the President's Warren Buffett rule. And one other thing it will do, it will stop tax benefits that companies receive for sending jobs overseas. Finally. So that sort of in broad strokes is the Rebuild America Act. It's comprehensive and ambitious. It'll go a long way towards rebuilding middle class in this country. And I'm asking the CWA for your strong support of it when we roll that thing out in a couple of weeks or so. Let me just conclude with this. You've been very kind to give me this time. For 3 decades now, our country has been held back by a failed trickle-down economic program for the rich. It's never worked. Never worked. I'll never forget one time I was out campaigning and an unemployed union worker came up to me and said, this trickle-down economics, he said, I haven't filled a drop. He said, hell, I'd settle for a heavy dew. Or to push a barnyard analogy, trickle-down economics is a notion that the best way to feed the sparrows is to give more oats to the horse. All you city folks, don't think about it. Think about it a second, okay? I mean, if you don't get it, ask somebody from Iowa who's here what that means. They're all over here. So instead of trickle-down economics, it's time for percolate-up economics. Again, like I always like to say, you don't fertilize a tree from the top down, you put it in at the roots. There can be no sustainable economic recovery, no return to fiscal balance, no recovery of the middle class with trickle-down economics. The middle class is the backbone of this country. It's time for Washington to have the backbone to not only defend it, but to rebuild it. Again, I want to thank CWA for all that you do, not just to fight for your own members, but for working people all across this country. You fight for people who aren't even in unions. That's right. You folks make more than the minimum wage, but you're out there fighting for a higher minimum wage for other workers. Most of you have health insurance, but you fought hard to pass the Affordable Care Act for 30 million Americans who don't have health insurance. So, for as long as I have been associated with the CWA, and it's going on 40 years now, you folks have fought to lift people up and not to put others down. So I'm proud to be your partner in this fight. I appreciate your great support down through the years. I think if we take this positive can-do spirit, our populist progressive message, rebuilding the middle class of America, strengthening organized labor, we make that clear and unequivocal to the American people, we will prevail. Thank you.